Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Global History with Mr. Langella, or also known as Langella Sensei. I'm glad to be with you guys today, and I'm looking forward to this coming week to kind of show you guys just the rest of Chapter 12. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff in here that I really enjoy, and global history in general is just really, really fun, but I really like Chapter 12. It has a lot of interesting, concepts, videos, and different groups that we have already talked about, but it's only going to get better from here. So, last time we were here, guys, we talked a lot about the Chinese. We talked about the Tang and Sung. We talked about all the different, the social structures. We talked about the different innovations. We did a lot of information. And you guys did the worksheet, the Tang and Sung worksheet, which was due on, I think it was Sunday night. I had to do by. I changed the due date for you guys. But now we're transitioning into the Mongols, right? We already talked about the Mongols in a certain way. I just want to make sure we get there first. Make sure you guys do the questions here, because these questions, hint, will be seen, right? Maybe possibly on a quiz or a test, so be sure to do that. All right. Also, make sure you do the main ideas. It helps you guys organize your thoughts. And also, if you didn't notice, it does have the page numbers here that what you were doing. All right. That being said, we are on section 2, the Mongol Conquests. Okay. So just to give you guys a little bit of setting the stage. Now, as the Chinese were prospering, right, under the Song dynasty, a great people far to the north were also gaining strength, and that is the Mongols, okay? Now, they lived there for all their lives, and they were a very, nomadic group. They were always moving all the time, which is why they were never really particularly great at kind of organizing a large empire, because they're always known to be, nomads. And now what? They're going to be a civilized empire-building group? No, it never really works out that way. So the Mongols were always kind of a moving group of kind of bandits for a long time. But with having this ability to always on the move, they excelled in a lot of different things. Horseback, they had a higher level of discipline, and they were ruthless. But then on top of that, they were just courageous in battle, right? They were just warriors on the battlefield. Now, they were very similar to what we associate a lot of every single type of warrior class, right? Whether it's the knights, whether it's the samurai a little bit later on. But they always wanted mainly two things. They wanted wealth and they wanted glory, right? So that's what their sights are always aligned on wealth and glory. And now their desires are now going to be met when they target Asia and Europe. All right, so just to give you guys a little bit of background, now they come from the steppe, which is also the dry grassland of Eurasia, which is basically their home for nomadic life. There are two major expanses for Central Asia and to Eastern Europe and Mongolia. This was the first home of the Huns, the Turks, and the Mongols. Now, there was little rain here. There was some dramatic seasonal temperatures, so it was crazy. There was never a consistent temperature, in this area. It ranged from being negative 57 degrees Fahrenheit, and this is a real number, in the winter, to 96 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. You want to talk about New York being drastically different when it comes to summer and the winter? Imagine there, okay? Now, they were a very nomadic way of life. They're pastoralists, which their main source of living was herding domestic animals. Now, as I said before, because of the way they lived, they were skilled horsemen, right? They always were living on the horse, so for them to now have combat by being on a horse, this is pretty easy. Now, and they lived in what we known as clans, right, or kin groups linked by a common ancestor, right? Now, they lived in somewhat settled communities, and they did. That's how the population had increased, but they were never really good at just commanding a large economy or a large empire just for that sake. Now, they had some interactions that were peaceful, as in they had to be able to have some trade, but big thing for them is that they were always trying to expand their wealth. Because understand, living in the steppe, I just pressed on a different thing. Living in the steppe, they really didn't have capabilities of farming on large lands because of the kind of the land that they lived on, right? We looked at how there's little rain, there's not really a good area for them to farm in, and then the temperatures were dramatically different, right, from winter to summer. So they couldn't really have a easy way to trade their farm goods. So what they needed to do was, in order for them to survive, they had to raid local towns and cities to gain the goods they needed to survive. So their mindset was that when they were targeting where to go, where are we going to raid? If they look at an empire or a state that was well organized, they said that's not the best idea, right? The reason why is because they had a strong enough military to protect its frontier or its outskirts. However, if the empire was divided and weak, that means that this is key. They would increase their attacks and gain more plunder in these areas. Now, occasionally, they were able to now conquer the entire empire if they were weak enough. Now, what the Mongols, as we know, they do conquer empires because they end up basically over time chipping away, and they're just so masterful in combat that they're able to do this on several different ways. Now, the greatest leader, now this is the debate, which was the greatest leader? Was it really Genghis Khan, or was it his grandson, Kublai Khan, okay? But let's talk about Genghis Khan. He was also known as the universal leader that unites the Mongols. So now we have a nomadic group that is now united, which is kind of crazy. His first goal was to beat China, right? After invading northern Jin Empire, and we did talk about the Jin a little bit in the last section, in 1211, he usually kind of focuses his attention on the Islamic Western region in Mongolia. By 1225, however, he controls Central Asia in general. Now, I did provide for you guys a little bit of his background origin here. You guys can read that on your own. That's perfectly fine. But as a leader himself, Genghis Khan was brilliant. He was a great organizer and strategist, and he would outsmart his opponents. Now, what's interesting is that he actually would model his military very similar to China. And what he did was he grouped his warriors in 10,000 platoons, and then he would divide it even amongst, so they wouldn't have 10,000 battalions, and they were 1,000 platoons, and they would have it would be very, very organized for a group of nomadic warriors. Now, he would do many different styles of attacking, but he used to do a lot of bait and ambush attacks, which is also known as guerrilla warfare, right? Which is, for the time period, that was very unheard of. And we saw another group previously that did the same thing in other chapters, but this was very, very smart because no one else had ever done this before. Now, if he knew, if he can get them narrowed down to a small group, and he knew that my guys would beat them one-on-one, almost definitely, and that's what happened. Now, on top of everything, Genghis Khan used cruelty. He used his brutal force as a weapon to terrify his enemies into surrendering. As in, if they use a city basically to kind of, if they lock themselves in, what they would do is they would go to the neighboring cities and completely annihilate the population and say, if you refuse us to conquer you, this is what's going to happen to you. And if they did still somehow stand off and not be afraid to let them in, he would just wipe out the entire area. He would kill them all, even when he did break in, because he knew he could do it by force anyway, but he gave them an option to surrender. And the more stories about Genghis Khan and his cruelty, once it spread around, they all surrendered anyway. So I give you guys a biography, a little bit of video of Genghis Khan, so let's take a look. Okay, so when you look at the fighting force themselves, they had a lot of different things that kind of showed how strong that they were, right? Their armor was extremely powerful, okay? And their weapons were pretty top notch for this time period. And I think that's really the biggest thing that was interesting about the warriors themselves. Now, they were extremely well versed fighting force, and they were just athletically up there with as much as anyone. They were probably the most athletic warriors of this time period. Now, they were able to cover 120 miles in a day. And it was kind of crazy because no one else could do these things. Now, to give the credit not only just to the soldiers, but to the horses themselves, to be able to cover that much ground in a short period of time. Now, after Genghis Khan dies in 1227, his successors start to continue his path. Now, as in the video showed you already, all the way from the Yellow Sea to the Caspian Sea was his reign. Now, if you look at the map itself, it breaks down all the different Khan groups that had emerged, okay? Now, remember, we talked about the Khanate of the Golden Horde, right? We did talk about this group last chapter. Remember, these are all different groups here. So if you're going to separate all the different groups, there are all these different groups have their own different leader, a part of it, but they're all part of the Mongols themselves. Okay, so what you guys could do from the bottom is answer these two questions. You can answer in the top section, anywhere on this little map. So you write it in here and here. That's fine. It's really short. It's just kind of giving you some map identification. All right, so after he dies, like I said, they kind of conquer so much different territory. In the east, they conquer northern China and invade Korea. In the west, they take Kiev and threaten Vienna and Venice. In 1250s, they turn their attention to Persia. In 1260, the Mongols split into Khantes, or into the four different regions as these four are shown. Okay. Now, as Mongols as rulers, they kind of were tolerant. They were tolerant of people's cultures. They're tolerant of their religions. You know, they rarely imposed their beliefs on anybody that they conquered. The only thing they really wanted was just to kind of to pay tribute. That was really all they had asked for. Now, some actual Mongols actually adopt local traditions and local ways, which actually ends up splitting them because they're all different, and that kind of doesn't really create unification if they're all different in different ways. Okay, so the Ilkhans of the Golden Horde, for example, they become Muslims, right, because of the area that they've taken over. And they actually, a lot of the differences between the different countries had actually part of the reason why the empire did end up breaking up over time. Okay. Now, we start the transition now into a peaceful period from the mid-1200s into the mid-1300s, which is also known as Pax Mongolica, okay? Or Pax Mongolia, all right? These are different ways that we should say it, but this time period had basically guaranteed the safe passage for trade caravans and travelers and missionaries from one end of the empire to another, and this kind of connects the trade between Europe and Asia like we've never seen before, and we start to see this massive cultural transition occur. So now let's look at these 4 questions. I want you guys to answer them in your PowerPoints, and try your best. All right, and also I want you guys to answer these 2 main idea questions: the Mongol Conquest, which is in sections 330 to 334. And I want you guys to answer these 2 questions: why were nomads and settled peoples sometimes in conflict? And then number 2, what were the most important accomplishments of the Mongol Empire? Okay, so now we are going to look at the Mongol Empire itself. Is going to be the next portion of this. So what I'm going to do for you guys is also I'm going to take a look at the worksheet. I actually have it here for you guys. A notability. This will go along with the worksheet, the PowerPoint lecture video I just gave you guys. So it's going to talk about how the Mongols had gained, consolidated, and maintained their power. Now, the first part's pretty easy. You're going to give almost a prediction of, how you guys think that Mongols have gained, consolidated, and maintained their power. And then you guys are going to kind of follow along this path. This image, a lot of stuff's going on, but you should definitely read this bottom portion here. It actually helps understand what's going on in this picture, and just go through all the different things. Now, this sheet's a little long, so I think it's 7 pages long, and at the end, you need to kind of pick a certain event and explain by circling one of these to talk about why this event that you picked would be considered this, okay? And it goes along with what we talked about already. You don't have to fill out the Mongol section of the Venn diagram. You don't have to do that. That's just for another portion, okay? Alrighty. So I think we will possibly